Layla Shaver with My RA Lawyer here today, and I wanted to talk to you about valuation processes. Before you're like, stop, I don't want to hear about it, let me give you some context. So recently, I went to my first on-site, in-person SEC exam in 3 years. Yes, you may be thinking like, what the hell did that firm do? The SEC is actually going back to pre-COVID operations. So if you haven't had an SEC exam yet, your next one is going to be live and living color. So be prepared. But what has been most interesting for me is that the last 3 or 4 exams that I've been a part of this year, valuation has come up with the examiners. And more specifically, valuation when it comes to alternative products. You can't just rely on your custodian or your fund managers anymore. You have a fiduciary obligation when it comes to valuation. So today, I want to talk to you about the 5 things you need to know when it comes to putting a value on the alternative products in your client's portfolio. First and foremost, policies and procedures. Policies and procedures. Policies and procedures. Yes, you need to have policies and procedures when it comes to your valuation process. Whether or not you're doing it internally or outsourcing it to a third party, you need to have very clear policies and procedures. Not only do you need to document them, but your team actually needs to be following them. So yes, you can be fined for violating your firm's own compliance policies and procedures. So make sure they're prepared, they're practical, and you're actually executing them. The second thing you need to know is that you have to have criteria and methods for valuation for each of your alternative products. The criteria and method for valuation is going to differ based on the alternative product and the underlying assets. So I'm going to give you a few examples. So for example, with private equity, you can look at similar performing funds. You can look at the future cash flow projections for the fund. You can look at the market outlook and what's happening in the market. You can look at the performance of the underlying companies and assets in the fund. There are a lot of things you can look at when it comes to creating a valuation of that product. But the important piece is that you're looking at different factors. Second example I want to go over is hedge funds. So I know a lot of times RAs and BDs alike are relying upon the fund manager when it comes to valuation. And that's fine if the fund manager is performing valuation and has a methodology to do so. Your responsibility is going to independently review and verify that that process is appropriate. However, if you determine that the process is not appropriate or your fund manager is not providing valuations, you are going to have to look at things like benchmark indices to look at performance similar to the strategy that's in the fund. You're going to want to look at the risks, liquidity. You want to look at these different factors to determine, is the valuation appropriate? And if you're not receiving that valuation from the fund manager, determining what that valuation should be. The second example I want to discuss is hedge funds. A lot of you probably rely on broker-dealers or the fund managers for the valuation, and that's fine, so long as you review their process for valuation and determine that it's appropriate. If they're not providing you the valuation or their process is not appropriate, then you're going to have to look at some other criteria to determine what the valuation of that hedge fund product should be. You can look at publicly traded securities or benchmarks that are similar in strategy to the hedge fund strategy. You want to look at redemption capabilities in the hedge fund. You want to look at liquidity. Is there liquidity or not? And you want to look at potential risks and performance of the underlying assets. Reviewing these items should be able to help you come up with a good value for a hedge fund. The third example I want to go over is real estate. There are a lot of real estate-based products out there, and it's likely you have some of your clients in them. You can look at, when it comes to valuation, at similar properties in the area. You can look at projected future rental income or revenue from the real estate. You can look at zoning ordinances in the area, look at potential licensing restrictions in the area. There are a lot of different criteria you can review when it comes to real estate. Unfortunately, a lot of funds that are valuating their REITs or other real estate backed funds are really kind of going off of cash basis, which is not appropriate. So you want to look at market performance, you want to look at the valuation of similar properties, and you want to use that rather than what the fund is providing you if it's not appropriate. So overall, the methods and criteria for valuation are going to differ based on what the underlying asset is. And you want to make sure that part of your due diligence product, when you're evaluating whether or not to make a product available to your clients, includes a review of the valuation process. How are these funds determining what is the value of an investor's investment in their fund? Include that in your due diligence. And to the extent they don't have an appropriate method or don't provide you a valuation, you have to make sure your team has the appropriate method and criteria to follow in order to come up with the valuation itself. So the third thing you got to know, once you've got your policies and procedure, your methods and criteria, like anything else when it comes to alternatives, you've got to review that valuation on an ongoing basis. You've got to look at what similar products are doing and make sure that to the extent a valuation needs to be altered or updated, that you're able to do so. The fourth thing you should know, and I say this about anything that happens in the RA business, CYA, cover yo ass. That means document. Document your process, document your due diligence, document the valuation process you went through to update the value of an investor's investment. Document, document, document. So the fifth thing you've got to know is that you've got to do an annual review of your valuation processes to make sure they're still appropriate and effective. So that means reviewing your policies and procedures, reviewing the methods and criteria for valuation, looking at the documentation of previous valuations conducted. Review all these things to determine if there are any changes that need to be made, and of course, document that review. These are all going to help you during your next SEC exam and show regulators that you know what the hell to do when it comes to evaluating alternative investment products. Now remember, this all falls under that special word you all love, your fiduciary obligations. That's right. Valuating products, ensuring that the third party that's valuating them is appropriate, and if not, doing the valuation yourself, is all part of your requirement to do what's in the best interest of the client and to act as a fiduciary towards them. So if you are making alternative investments available to your clients, you're recommending these different types of products to them, you really got to make sure you're evaluating whether or not you have an appropriate valuation process in place. So now that you know these 5 things when it comes to the valuation process, if you are looking at your firm and you're like, we're good, we're great, then kudos to you. But if you're like most of the advisors I've talked to where you have incredibly lax or no valuation process in place at all, and you're routinely selling and recommending alternative products to your clients, then you need to give us a call today to avoid any potential SEC enforcement or fines or regulatory action. Give us a call, 770-462-2118, and we'll help you clean up house before they come in for your next exam.